Alex Pereira was regarded as one of the most lethal men in combat sports long before he came to the UFC. And that signature left hook of his really does come to the fore a lot during his kickboxing days too. One man who felt that power to its fullest early on was Dustin Jacoby, a guy who also ended up in the UFC before too long. This knockout was all about the precision on display, and when he caught Jacoby moving inwards, you could see that a spark of energy went through his target's body. That's some real power on display, folks. Jacoby was sent to the Shadow Realm with this one. This is the type of KO that some fighters simply never recover from. How could we have known at the time just how much of an impact this fight would eventually have on the sport of MMA? But despite his strong start, Israel Adesanya's kickboxing rematch with Alex Pereira took a turn for the disastrous when his Brazilian adversary capitalizing on a split-second opening, catching Izzy with the perfect knockout punch. That clean left hook that no fighter on the planet could stand up to. And despite the fact that the last stylebender was a legit top 10 guy at this point in time, his chin simply could not handle that signature Poatan shot. And with that, the seeds were planted for one of the greatest combat sports rivalries of this era. A pairing that would shake the foundations of two different sports. As things stood, it was now 2-0 Pereira. By the time Alex Pereira rose up and won titles in two different weight classes in glory, the kickboxing world were very aware of the fact that he packed a gargantuan punch with his left hand. But a guy like Yusri Belgari fell into the trap of putting way too much of his attention on avoiding the left hand. Because just as he was getting comfortable with his distance from that primary weapon, Pereira landed a massive overhand right. You'll begin to see the variety of Poatan's skill set shine through more and more through his fighting career, especially when he moves to MMA. His left hook might be his best shot, but don't for 1 second make the mistake of thinking that he doesn't have other deadly weapons at his disposal. Remember, if you're enjoying this content, be sure to leave a like and a comment before subscribing to the channel so you don't miss a single upload. When Poatan took on Jason Wilness, he really had something very, very special up his sleeve. Remember how we were warning against guys thinking that Pereira was a one-trick pony? Well, Wilness didn't see that first knockdown coming. A rapid head kick with very little telegraphing on it. It landed with such quick force that it seemed to shock Wilness, but you do gotta give credit where it's due. He managed to get himself right back up on his feet and continue fighting, or at least he did up until Pereira demolished him with a gigantic flying knee for the instant KO. Pereira was proving time and time again that he was the complete package. The way he took out a fighter as good as Wilness proved just how far beyond the pack he was growing. On the long list of amazing left hook KOs that Pereira has on his record, this one right here might just be the best of the lot. Ertuğrul Bayrak seemed to be coasting his way into the final seconds of this round, and Pereira did appear to be allowing it, but just as his opponent showed him a critical gap in his defenses, Poatan exploded forth with a short but violently thrown left hook, one that caught Bayrak clean and sent him tumbling into the ropes just as this round came to an end. It was a buzzer-beater finish for Pereira and the final knockout of his kickboxing career that we'll be featuring. From here, Chapter 2 of the Alex Pereira story begins, and we get to see this insanely gifted finisher swap out those large gloves for some 4-ounce ones. And if you ask us, the impact his punches were having seemed to double. This was shown best when he took on Thomas Powell in the LFA, a fight that garnered some real attention. Would the guy who once KO'd Israel Adesanya be any good in this new sport? Well, that was a question that a lot of casual fans had, and if they weren't initially impressed, this nuclear bomb of a left hook no doubt got their attention. It was a viral KO for Poatan and one that opened the door to a UFC debut. Alex Pereira was always going to be capable of making a huge statement with his first outing in the UFC. All he needed was the right opponent and to spot the perfect opening. When he took on Andreas Michailidis, it took him just a matter of minutes to gauge his rival's timing, waiting till the very beginning of round 2 in order to get Michailidis in the perfect position to feint his way into a huge flying knee. And you could just tell off the crowd's reaction that they were impressed. He wasn't quite there yet, but the early signs of Alex Pereira being an MMA success story were already showing. Little did we know just how far he would eventually go. The UFC clearly wanted to get Pereira into a title fight with Israel Adesanya, and despite him having only 2 fights in the promotion, Dana White and his team decided to call the one guy in the entire top 15 who would never dream of wrestling him. Enter Sean Strickland, a man who had way too much street pride to resort to fighting smart against a way better kickboxer. And sure enough, once Poatan had made his reads, and it did not take long, he landed a huge left hook to drop Strickland, eventually finishing him and setting up a championship trilogy fight with Adesanya in just his 4th UFC appearance. This was the big one. Whether you agreed with Pereira getting rushed into a title shot or not, the UFC wanted it. Adesanya was desperate for his chance at revenge, and Pereira was only too happy to step in there. This fight was billed as a very unique challenge for Izzy as champ, but it was clear that most fans believed that Stylebender's entire MMA skill set would prove too much for this inexperienced opponent. However, what they didn't foresee was just how calm Pereira would be in this moment and how physical he was for the 185-pound weight class. Adesanya was definitely winning, but Pereira was by no means out of this bout, not at all. But coming into the dying embers of round 5, it did appear as though Izzy was just moments away from securing yet another title defense. And then, out of nowhere, it happened. That left hook landed on Izzy's chin, sending his fans into panic mode immediately. All of a sudden, Pereira was all over him, landing shot after shot until the referee jumped in to call it off. Pereira had done the impossible, moving to 3-0 against Adesanya and becoming a UFC champion in the process. Of course, Izzy would find his way towards redemption, KOing Pereira in their 4th fight to earn back some of the pride he had lost. But Poatan had already written his name into the history books. All that remained for him to do now was to see just how far he could take it. Looking up at the 205-pound division seemed like a far better fit for a man of Pereira's massive frame. And so he stepped in there with the former champ, Jan Blachowicz, won and then got yet another title fight, this time the vacant belt against Jiří Procházka. And if you're looking for the most complete performance of Alex's career so far, this was it. He worked Procházka's legs with his excellent kicking, used his own defense to stifle the Czech samurai's wildness. When he found his moment, he countered him with a big shot, eventually setting up the finish with some vicious elbow. It might have been a little early on the ref's part, but this Alex Pereira we're talking about, and he could have dished out some major damage had the fight been allowed to continue. In just a handful of UFC outings, Alex Pereira had become a 2-weight world champion, an astonishing feat for a guy who has to be considered among the greatest combat sports athletes to ever lace up gloves.